6 scary, true, creepy, and disturbing horror stories that will make your body shiver with fear. Number 1. Late night laughter. Just over 10 years ago, I was fresh out of college and had moved back to my parents' house for the free rent/food for 9 months before I was leaving the state for graduate school. To earn some scratch, I took a part-time gig doing some light bookkeeping for a small business owner guy that my dad knew. They had a business where you could rent low-level farm equipment, a small mom-and-pop type thing in the sticks. Since they knew my family, they trusted me to go in there for about 15 to 20 hours a week and check and file the rental forms, make sure nobody missed a payment date, answer an email or two discussing prices/availability, etc. Super easy gig. The old building where I worked was about 90 years old and at the top of this little hill. The downstairs used to be an old country bar until the 1970s. I could work any hours I wanted to as long as the work got done, so I'd usually go in after 7 p.m. and stay until around midnight or 1 a.m., since I knew I'd be alone and could listen to music loud and take my time. The office was on the second floor of the building and looked out onto the long driveway. One night during winter, it had snowed a few inches, but I was desperate to get out of the house, so I went into work at about 8 p.m. I always left the gate open at the bottom of the hill, since, believe me when I say that, nobody ever showed up at night. We were literally in the middle of nowhere. To even turn onto our short road, you had to only be coming to our specific building and know it was there beforehand. So I was jamming away to some Fallout Boy, Everyone Makes Mistakes When They're Young, and having some coffee, and I kept glancing at the snow outside as I worked, since our one orange street light reflected onto the ground at the gate and was causing the light to shine off the snow in a really cool, dare I say beautiful, way. Around midnight I went downstairs to do my bathroom business, then came back upstairs and got settled back into my work. I probably did about 5 minutes of work when I glanced outside and saw a huge imprint of something in the fresh snow just below the orange light. It seemed like a huge dog or substantial animal had just rolled around on the ground there on its back or something. Since I didn't notice it just 15 minutes before, it had to have happened while I was in the bathroom. I shook it off and assumed an animal was attracted to the light or something. At around 2 a.m., I was leaving and got out of my car to lock the gate, and to be honest, I had pretty much forgotten about the imprint in the snow. But when I looked down, I was shocked to see that it wasn't just some disturbed snow, but it was undeniably the imprint of a human-made snow angel. I used to make snow angels when I was a kid, and they are also very recognizable, so I 100% knew for sure that's what this was. And it was deliberately made underneath the light post. But it wasn't from a kid, it was from a very large person. And I already knew, whoever had made this snow angel could easily have looked up and have seen me through that window, so they must have waited for me to head downstairs to the bathroom to make this angel. No cars had pulled up to our building. I would have seen/heard them, even from the bathroom, so I glanced around for footprints in the snow and saw that there was one set that led to the nearby woods to the right of the building. It was clear the person didn't use the road, but instead came from the opposite side, which instantly made me uneasy, since that side was just trees and darkness for miles and miles. By now, I was freaking out and trying to get back in my SUV. And that's when I heard it. Before I could get inside, I heard loud, high-pitched laughing coming from the woods. It almost sounded like a fake laugh, like the witch in The Wizard of Oz, like someone was doing it fake on purpose. It was close enough that I knew they could see me, but I couldn't see them at all, since other than the street light I was under, there was no illumination. After a few seconds of laughing, they stopped. And then it was just silence everywhere, except for my heart beating through my ears. Then, the laughing started again, though louder this time, more like screaming and laughing combined. I sort of froze for like 5 seconds, listening in a panic. Now, I spent a lot of time in that area, and I know what coyotes and foxes sound like at night with their high-pitched screeches during mating season, but this was very human. It felt like it was an adult man trying to emulate a woman laughing, like someone was deliberately trying to make a fake scary shriek laugh in order to scare someone. Well, it fucking worked. After 5 seconds, I immediately filled up with adrenaline, got in my car and drove the hell away from there as fast I could without sliding off the road. I worked there another 6 weeks or so and never had a single issue, though I knew where my boss kept his gun, and I always made sure it was there when I started my shift. And I certainly always locked the gate from then on. Number 2. The Black Dog. So, this story is pretty simple, but it always stuck with me. I grew up in the thick of southern Appalachia. I never gave much credence to the old folk tales I heard, and there were plenty. I met my boyfriend when I was 16. Drugs had saturated our area. To party, we would ride down the mountain in his black Honda Civic, out the several miles of gravel road to the army camp at the river to party. This particular night there was going to be a meteor shower and we wanted to see it. We crept through the darkness, down the winding mountain, across the bridge, down the access road towards the river. I had been there 100 times. The night felt unreasonably dark. Heavy, almost. There were no real residences on this road that led right to the waters of the freezing New River. I was not really a believer of anything supernatural, I'm still really skeptical. We were rumbling down the road and nothing seemed out of place until we saw it. In the road ahead, a black dog. Not a wolf, but easily just as big. A Great Dane, if I've ever seen one, and I had not in real life. There are no residences, nothing around that would make you think that this expensive dog would be on this road. But there it stood in our headlights, and my boyfriend rolled to a stop as we looked at it. It was kind of postured. I don't know. It was illuminated by our headlights, hackles up in a way I'd never really seen. It just stood there. He beeped his horn and started creeping closer in the car. This dog did not care, was seemingly unconcerned. The closer we got, the more unreasonably unnerved I felt. It was just staring at us. Like I could feel its gaze. Through the windshield. Until it was practically against the bumper and it was not going to move. We were at a standoff. So, my boyfriend went around. He painstakingly cut his wheels, went off the gravel road to go around this unmoving hulk of a black dog. If it was in the middle of the road, we veered to the left of it so that it was on my side as we moved past. I remember how it stared at me. It was so tall that it was eye level with me in the passenger seat. I remember begging him to hurry past because there was this awful feeling that it was aware of my discomfort. I'll never forget staring into its shock yellow eyes, right at eye level, as we veered around. It stared at me, unmoving, unbothered. Then we just rolled around it. Its head didn't move, it didn't adjust its gaze as we continued. It disappeared into the inky darkness of that road, and I felt so cold. So upset. We got to the river, and I refused to leave the car. I had this unmistakable feeling that that thing was still out there. Just beyond the trees. Somewhere out in that pitch black. There was a meteor shower that night, and I barely watched it through the car's sunroof, because all I felt was that gaze, those horrible yellow eyes. It was still out there. I never liked going back to the river after that. I can't even describe the sense of dread, the feeling of a thing being so out of place. I never saw it again, though. But I'll never forget it. I never knew something that seemed so common, it was just a dog, could make me feel such deep dread, such palpable unease. Even now, thinking of those eyes makes my throat tighten. I feel like I saw the devil that night. Number 3. Beach Town. We moved to a small beach town about 4 years ago, became friends with our neighbors, and enjoyed the more relaxed and slowed-down lifestyle that a small beach town offers. Nothing spooky here. The only thing off about it was the drug problem in the neighborhood. We'd occasionally see people passed out behind the wheel of their cars. One time, we found a note in our bushes imploring us to give back my children. I have several young ones, and that they, the writer of the note, was coming back to get them. Weird, and worth a call to the local sheriff's department, but that was it. About a year ago, or maybe longer, since I think it was mid-pandemic, my incredibly capable and stout-hearted neighbor, I'll call her Mary, knocked on my door and asked me out to the middle of the street to talk. She then apologized to me and asked if we were all right. Surprised, I said, "Yeah, we're okay, why?" Mary is a no-nonsense, second-generation German-American, about 65, works all day in her garden, taught for 40 years, and is fazed by nothing. She says sorry, because she didn't get to talk to us last night or check on us during all the commotion, and that it wasn't very neighborly of her, but it was just so late and her nerves were frazzled. I told her that nothing happened last night and that there was nothing to apologize for. That's when I see another neighbor, Ron from a block over, walking up to us. Unbelieving, she says, "What? I could have sworn I saw you outside last night during the commotion." Ron, not his real name, now right next to us, says, "Dude, how could you not have heard it?" Apparently the night before, around 1 a.m., Mary heard a loud booming coming from her front room. Like all the houses on our street that face the coast, hers is dominated by a large picture window that overlooks the hill down towards the water. Thinking it was just sonic booms, or artillery testing, we live next to a military base, rattling the window, she didn't think much of it. However, after a while, Mary said that she thought the booms were getting louder and that they might break the window, so she got up. When she walked from the back bedroom she shares with her husband, who was still asleep, into her front room and turned on the light, the booming on the window stopped. She noticed after turning on the light, that her front picture window now seemed to be covered in mud. After looking around for a few seconds, seeing nothing, she turned off the lights and headed back to bed, again, fazed by nothing. As soon as the house was dark the booming started again, this time coming from the front door. Inset slightly from the window, the front door has a tall thin window next to it that allows you to see who's in the inset. In the dark, Mary said she peeked through the window and saw movement. Immediately awake, she went back to the bedroom to get her husband. Now Mike, not his real name, is an old-school beach bum and firefighter, has seen it all, and has no time for nonsense. So Mike gets up, forgoes getting the guns that Mary says he has, after all this is a nice beach town, and walks with Mary behind him to the front door. Carrying just a tennis racket, Mike turns on all the inside lights, as well as the porch and outside lights. As soon as all the lights are on, Mary screams. All the stuff on the front window that she thought was mud gets lit up. But it's not mud, it's blood, hundreds of bloody hand prints of someone banging on the front window. And now that banging was coming from the front door. Mary tells Mike not to open the fucking door and picks up the phone to call 911. At this point, two things happen. Mike opens the door, and the person at the front door starts screaming. Mary says that all she could hear was, and I fucking kid you not, "Help me! Help me! They've took my kids and are eating my face. They're eating my face." Through the crack in the chain door, Mike is now looking at a woman, or what he thought was a woman, with long black hair, covered in blood and pounding on the door. "Help me, they've stole my kids and are trying to eat my face," was all this person kept saying. Mary said that there was so much blood on this person that she couldn't tell what she looked like. And what they at first thought was long dark hair was actually blood pouring in rivulets from their scalp. Here's the kicker, Mary, now on the phone with the sheriff, starts relaying to them what's going on, and this is what the sheriff says back: "Ma'am, we're aware of the situation and are handling it." "How exactly are you fucking handling this?" she says. The 911 operator tells her that the sheriff and deputies are on the street in front of her house and are monitoring the situation. This is when Ron jumps in. Apparently, this truly disturbed person had been going to every house on his block, in our block, pounding on the windows and doors while screaming the same thing, basically, that someone stole their children and was trying to eat their face, while the fucking cops followed them from a distance. They had hit at least 10 houses with this same shit. For some reason, the sheriffs decide to take the person into custody right before they reach our house. I have several young kids, as well as a large old picture window that surely would have broken after a few good slaps. That morning, Mary shows Ron and I her front door and window. So much blood. There was never any follow-up from the sheriffs as to who the bloody person was or what eventually happened to them. The only thing we ever heard was that it was someone known to them, and that drugs were involved. Number 4. The Ghost of the Hanged Man. One theme that many ghost stories have in common is that they offer a sense of justice in return for a wrongful death. This particular ghost story, however, offers a somewhat different take. It's about wrongful treatment in death and revenge in the afterlife. On October 13, 1877, Robert Schmale was hanged after a trial that found him guilty of a terrifying and inexplicable murder spree. The townspeople were filled with so much anger and hatred that they left his body hanging for days. The tale says not one of the townspeople demonstrated even a shred of remorse, let alone forgiveness. Since then, Schmale has been said to haunt the town. Those who have seen him say he appears as a ghostly male figure, but as soon as the figure registers in your mind, it disappears, somewhat maddeningly, into the darkness. Number 5. The Photo. Every summer, my wife's family spends 2 weeks at a lakeside cabin that they share with other members of the extended family. The cabin was built by my wife's grandfather and sits at the end of a dead-end road. Beyond the street's end is a dense wooded area. I've only ventured back there one time, where we found an old abandoned cabin. The family cabin has just 2 bedrooms. The kitchen and a living room/dining room make an L shape that wrap around the bedrooms, bordering 2 sides of the cabin. The living room/dining room has a screen door on each end, one leading to the lake at the front and the other the driveway in the back. The exterior wall of the living room has windows end to end. As you can imagine, the 2 bedrooms get crowded quickly when adult children and their families are all staying there at the same time. I have sleep issues, including insomnia and sleep apnea. I stopped using the CPAP because having my mouth and nose covered gave me panic attacks. Probably the only sleep issue I've never had is sleepwalking. One night at the cabin, I was tossing and turning and decided to go sleep on the couch in the living room/dining room so my restlessness and snoring wouldn't bother the other 3 people in the bedroom. It was already after dark, so I left a wall of windows uncovered. I scrolled through my phone until I felt tired enough to fall asleep. The next day we were all enjoying the lake, and I took several photos with my phone. Later, I was going through my photos and noticed one I didn't recognize. I opened it and found a photo that appeared to have been taken in the dark with a flash. There was a mayfly illuminated by the flash. Then I saw it. Behind the mayfly was a glimpse of my car's driver's side mirror, and part of the driver's door window. It had been taken at 1:42 a.m. the night before. My car was parked directly outside the wall of windows where I had been sleeping. Number 6. A face at the window. This happened to me the summer I turned 11, and is one of the scariest, weirdest things I've ever experienced. I'd think it was a nightmare except at the end, there was another witness. That summer, my parents sold our very regular, 1-story house and bought a much larger, incredibly unique house in the next town over. The architect who built it used all kinds of old, reclaimed materials, and almost all of the windows were antique stained glass that came from England. The outside had wide, rough cedar planks instead of regular siding, and my brother and I learned early not to run our hands over them, or we'd get splinters. It was the coolest house I've ever lived in. My room was also huge. It had its own bathroom and a walk-in closet. There were 2 large stained glass windows facing out towards the street, but at an angle, these windows were deeply recessed under the roof line. It was Florida, and this kept the scorching hot sun from shining directly in any of the rooms. When we moved in, my mom put my bed against the inner wall, facing the windows. Again, coolest, most beautiful, most original house I've ever lived in. Our parents didn't tell us about the house until the deed was done. Then they took us over there to see it, and we were so excited. It just seemed so huge and exotic and grand. We moved in, and my brother and I spent the summer exploring the neighborhood, which was a lot older than the one we moved from, with a bunch of cool older houses in it, and trying to meet some kids. Which we did. And when we did, we found out why our parents got a great price. The guy who built the house, who was a well-known local architect who'd built quite a few unusual, unique homes in the area, was also a convicted pedophile. He built the house we bought not long after he got out of prison for his wicked deeds. All the kids in the neighborhood knew about it from their parents, and when they found out which house we lived in, oh boy. You live in the haunted house. The guy who built your house is a pervert and went to jail for it, etc., etc. We got big eyes at the pervert revelation but snorted at the haunted house one, since no one lived in the house before us. What, exactly, was haunting it? I mean, it looked like it could be haunted, but it was also technically brand new, reclaimed materials or not. I also happened to read the Amityville Horror that summer, long before it was debunked as fake. I've always loved scary stories, ghost stories, stuff that scares people, and never felt especially scared or freaked out myself. But for some reason, that stupid fake-ass book scared the shit out of me, resulting in my developing some serious sleep issues that summer. It didn't help that we were in a huge, strange house that I wasn't used to yet, and also because the house had so much wood inside and outside of it that every room had a smoke alarm with a red light that was really noticeable at night. The one in my room was on the wall right next to the closet, and after reading that dumb book, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see the red light and immediately think of Jody, the pig demon thing with red glowing eyes the daughter in the book saw, and I'd lay there thinking about the book and freaking out about the light. It usually took me hours to relax enough to get back to sleep. This happened almost every night. Then, one night, I woke up needing to go to the bathroom, did it, get back in bed, and then lay there looking at that light and wishing for the millionth time I'd never read that damn book. It was after 2 a.m., the whole house is silent, and I was really not jazzed that the rest of my family was on the other side of the house, which isn't that far in the daytime but seems like miles in the dead of night. Then I saw something in the window out of the corner of my eye, and holy God, there was what looked like a human head peering in the window at me. 2 stories up, a head looking in. Okay, this next part is difficult to write because it was so fucking weird, and I really don't like remembering it. The windows of my room were very large, a 2-part design where the larger, lower half was a rectangle topped by a smaller sideways rectangle, intersected by a thick wooden frame. My mom put in shutters on the lower half and sheer curtains on the top half. Some parts of the window were clear like regular glass, some thick wavy glass, and some colored glass. When you looked through them, you'd get a distorted view of the outside, some clear and some not. So the head, or whatever it was, wasn't easy to see, except as a shape. It kept rising up above the shutters like it was trying to see into the room, then would sink back down. I have no idea how long it was doing that before I noticed it. My first thought was that someone was standing on a ladder, trying to see inside. But if that was the case, then either the ladder was propped against the window glass below, or the person was very tall. But then the head shape did something so horrible, so strange, I almost screamed out loud. It had been peeping up from below the shutters like a regular person would, but then it disappeared, and when it reappeared it was looking in from the side, like whatever it was changed position and was suspended sideways in the recess. Which was impossible. All thoughts of weird dude on ladder flew right out of my head, and bad thoughts about demons and monsters flew in. I lay there in absolute terror, watching as the figure would appear and disappear, sometimes from the left, sometimes from the right, then most horribly upside down as if whatever it was on the roof, hanging over and looking in. Except again, these windows were in deep recesses, and the head was right next to the glass, meaning, it was clinging, or God help me, floating, right outside. At some point I realized I could hear it as well. It made these faint scratching sounds as it moved around, sounding just like when squirrels scrambled around on the cedar planks. I couldn't see any facial features, and it didn't look like it had hair, but it definitely had an oval-shaped head. I don't know how long I lay there, scared to death and watching this thing look in my room, but then, having no idea what was happening, my brother walked in to use my bathroom. One of the less convenient features of this house was that his bathroom was actually located off the laundry room on the first floor, and he didn't like walking through a huge dark house in the middle of the night, so he used mine instead, which was fine with me and especially welcome at that moment, because it broke the strange spell. I screamed at the top of my lungs. The thing disappeared with a loud scratching noise like it had claws that slipped off the cedar planks, and my brother said, "What was that?" I started crying. "What was that?" my brother kept asking, and he was almost as shaken up as I was. He told me later that the minute he walked into the room he knew something fucked up was going on, as the hair on his arms stood straight up. I spent the rest of the night sleeping in his room on his spare twin bed. The next day, we went outside and looked all around, but there was no sign of anything, no marks in the ground if there was a ladder, no marks on the side of the house, no evidence at all that something had been crawling around my window, trying to see in. We never told our parents. They weren't the kind of people who believed in the supernatural and would have dismissed it as a nightmare. And it was the kind of soul-scarring experience that would be made so much worse for being dismissed out of hand as imagination, when I knew it really happened. Nothing like it ever happened again. We lived in that house for years and everything was fine. But I wasn't taking any chances either. The next day I rearranged my entire bedroom so that my bed was now between the windows, and I moved my dresser and mirror to a position where the mirror didn't face the windows either, so I wouldn't wake up and see something looking and reflected in the mirror. I also put a piece of tape over the red light and the smoke alarm, much to my stepfather's annoyance. I told him it kept me up at night, which wasn't a lie.